On December the 7th, 2005, Channel 4 broadcast a video by British playwright Harold Pinter, a lecture given on the occasion of his having been awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in that year. To anyone I knew who watched it, and to myself, it was a shock and awe event. First, he outlined some of the principles of his art. How meaning is elusive, truth relative. Then he talks about where there should be a difference between Pinter the artist and Pinter the citizen. As a citizen, he says, he must acknowledge that there is a truth to be found. The truth that he devotes the greater part of his lecture to bringing us is what he sees as being the global threat of the United States. In political drama, he says, sermon must be avoided at all cost. But real-life political language does not venture into the territory of real suffering, he says. He argues that the power of states depends on our ignorance, speaking as he does in the recent wake of 9/11 and America's subsequent crusade against an inconveniently nebulous threat. He talks about the lies that led us into a second war with Iraq, and about how there is a coverage gap between the former Soviet Union and the US when it comes to state/military crime. He describes how it is that we've managed to brush aside brutal US interventions in South American countries, interventions which are driven by a fear of anything even resembling Marxism gaining a foothold in the Americas, and about how the US undermines criticism through poisonous handshakes and clever marketing. The US is a significant player. It's the significant player in the West. Impossible to excavate without the consequence of a cataclysmic power vacuum. I wanted to bring Harold Pinter's lecture and these criticisms to your attention so that we should remember that global significance is a different thing from virtue or moral authority. I believe, however, that there is some virtue in, let's call it, the premise of America. It's a civil system that has a capacity for self-correction, even though correction is often well under or well over the optimum. It's a system that, like the UK, has so far managed to avoid a civil holocaust by incorporating the tension between the left and the right into itself. At the very least, we can see, undeniably, that the left and right are both granted enormous facility when it comes to media representation. And long may that continue. One of the things that stands in the way of a more refined democracy, however, is that just as the system auto-safeguards against extremism, it also has an upper limit when it comes to the thing that America really needs right now, which is conversation across the political divide. It's very tricky because, on the one hand, an adversarial system helps deter against catastrophic imbalance, but on the other hand, true political intersection is sneered at. It's bludgeoned whenever it pops up, because the party manifestations have to remain adversaries in order for an adversarial system to continue. As a consequence, what we're seeing now is that the Republicans and the Democrats are within themselves unbalanced. The qualifying question for representatives should be, how best can I serve the Republic? Instead, the question is, am I sufficiently opposed to the other side? And that question steers the political machine away from addressing the actual needs of the American people. It steers the conversation away from good solutions for fear that those solutions aren't sufficiently partisan. This tendency is now threatening the social fabric of the US. So, is America coming apart? Well, I don't know. Despite all outward appearance, it is, believe it or not, too early to tell. Certainly, things seem more unstable domestically than they have ever in my lifetime, but that's still not saying much. It's always a good idea, though, to look at efforts being made to improve the character of American politics, and by extension, I would hope, increase the human benefit of its extraordinary global influence. So I'm going to come clean about my own political agenda here, which is to recommend to you, particularly if you're American, obviously, that you seriously consider Bret Weinstein's Articles of Unity plan, outlined on their website, which I will link below. To very broadly outline the pitch, it's that whoever's president, the vice president has to be from the opposing party. How the bloomin' hell's that gonna work, you may ask? Well, let's look at the details. From the website, we the people draft 2 candidates, one from the left, one from the right. Once elected, they agree to govern as a team. All decisions and appointments will be made jointly in the interests of the American public. Only when they cannot reach agreement, or when a decision does not allow for consultation, does the president decide independently. A coin flip determines which candidate runs at the top of the ticket. Coin flip. Cool. Now, the most immediate concern seems to be election spoiling, which is when a third party or independent ends up giving the Republicans or the Democrats an advantage, an unfair advantage, by splitting votes between itself and the party that it has separated from during an election cycle. I know, it's a fucking headache. They address this with the following. First, by bridging the left and right, the unity ticket disempowers both major parties rather than empowering one or the other. Second, the plan includes a fail-safe. If, at a carefully chosen point prior to the general election, the unity ticket has no viable path to the White House, the candidacy will be suspended. Now, other questions arise, among them the viability of the timeline, the selection of candidates, and a plan to get on the ballot, all of which you can find their responses to by clicking the link to the website and by following the YouTube channel, which I will link also. I guess the first question has to be, though, why? What does Unity 2020 hope to achieve? What does it seek to remedy? In the words of the text, our 2 dominant political parties are entirely consumed by partisan politics and are clearly uninterested in serious solutions to an ever-expanding list of problems they had a powerful hand in creating. More disturbingly, the tools we might use to remedy this situation, tools granted us by our founding documents, appear to have been dulled to the point of uselessness by the major parties, parties which, in those brilliant blueprints, are nowhere mentioned. We lack consensus, even about matters of basic fact, and the current tools of collective sense-making are unable to close the gap. Our country is on the brink of economic catastrophe, and we are hobbled by our dependence on an outsourced manufacturing base. Massive protests reveal the depth of frustration, but these outpourings of genuine anger are all too easily co-opted and attention diverted away from real causes. While working-class Americans demonize each other, those who captured our system and hoarded opportunity continue to flourish at our expense. The world is losing confidence in America's capacity to lead. Even as Chinese geopolitical power expands, this could lead to a catastrophic war in the absence of sober leadership. Okay, so what's the plan? We fully intend to seat an administration that represents the interests of a clear and overwhelming majority of Americans. So what characteristics should this administration have? The ideal candidates will fulfill 3 criteria. 1, they must be patriotic. 2, they must be highly capable. 3, they must be courageous. After 4 years in office, the order reverses for the next election. This continues until the American public chooses an alternative administration or one of the members of the team cannot run for re-election, at which point a new patriot would replace them. The unity ticket represents our shared values and vision for the future. Now, I know who the candidates are, but I'm not going to talk about that here because I want to try and funnel curiosity towards the campaign itself. I will say that in the space of only a couple of months, the Unity ticket has gone from a podcast pipe dream to something that has caught the attention, shall we say, of the media and establishment. And although questions remain, it is my conviction that Bret Weinstein, Heather Heying, and their associates are people of good character, and in my opinion, and in the absence of any optimistic alternative, good character bodes well for the future of the movement. Unity 2020 is my current recommendation. Thank you very much for listening. Next week, something less serious, maybe.